Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Our focus today is on a very successful bird conservation effort. As part of this month's Bird Notes program, we're going to highlight the Bobolink Project. Joining us from the Audubon Center in Huntington is bird expert and conservation biologist Mark Labar. Thanks for being with us, Mark.
Always great to be here, Fran.
So we're starting to see the first spring arrivals, which will lead to the breeding season. And with that, the Bobolink Project. Tell us about it.
Right. It's a busy time out there with the birds getting back, the first ones being red-winged blackbirds. And closely related to the red-winged blackbirds are the bobolinks. And this is the time of year when we begin to start think about enrolling farmers and raising money for the Bobolink Project, which really helps to protect the species and make sure they have productive field seasons, breeding seasons. And, really the best person to talk about that and explain that is one of the founders, Dr. Alan Strong. And we've got a short little video with Dr. Strong in it, which I think we'll lead off with.
All right.
So bobolinks are blackbirds. They're actually related to red-winged blackbirds, to eastern meadowlarks, to Baltimore orioles. They are a charismatic and popular species. While the female is built for camouflage and protection of the nest, the male is really striking in its coloration. They're black on the belly, yellow on the nape of the neck, and white on the wings and on the back. Because of this species' popularity and the fact that they're declining throughout their range, this has become a really great study species for our research program. The bobolink population has declined roughly 75% in the last 40 to 50 years. So there's really two factors that are really driving the decline of bobolink populations in the Northeast, really throughout their range. So one of which has to do with the intensification of agricultural practices. The fact that we're cutting hay earlier in the season, we're also cutting it more frequently. Historically, when we began to farm the Northeast, our farming was not that intensive, and so a lot of the hay cutting that we did occurred around the 4th of July, which was perfect for bobolinks. Just enough time for them to get out of the nest before you've got any sort of disruption. And the other one is just the decline of the agricultural industry. What we were trying to understand with this project was really what would it take for farmers to basically incorporate grassland birds into their business model. And so in essence what that means for a farmer is that they're going to have to delay their cutting long enough for birds to successfully fledge young from their nest. So probably for these farmers they're going to have to go out and buy hay from someone else. One of the things that we were really interested in trying to understand here is this idea of whether or not people are willing to pay for certain goods and services that are essentially provided for free from nature. And so, basically anyone can drive down a country road and see a bobolink, but the question is, would you actually pay a landowner to actually conserve that? We learned that people love bobolinks and people are willing to pay directly to farmers to have them delay their cutting so that bobolinks can fledge young. So this year we went out and did surveys on all of these fields to try to get a handle for just how many bobolinks were nesting in these sites. We counted 128 females and 157 males on these 340 acres. And the typical reproductive rate for birds that are nesting on these late cut fields, these high quality fields, is a little over 2 young per female. We probably raised at least 250 bobolinks on these fields. So that's substantial when you start to get, raising hundreds of birds. I think you can make a difference at least at the local level. One of the things that's really interesting is to think about this whole suite of species that bobolinks sort of can represent. And so we've got this group of grassland birds that are declining throughout their range. In Vermont, we've got about 10 species that use this habitat. Everything from raptors like the northern harrier to rare sandpipers like the upland sandpiper. I think bobolinks can be that flagship species that people get excited about, that can also provide habitat conservation for a lot of other species as well.
It's a great video and a wonderful project and a really successful one. So this was made in 2014. What has happened since that time, when they were on, what, 340 acres or something, I think Dr. Strong mentioned?
Yeah, so they, they did these studies early on. Dr. Al Strong, I work with Al, and, they, back in 2014, and came up with these strategies for enhancing the bobolink project. And in the first year, in 2013 and 14, there were about 200 acres that were protected by raising money to compensate, farmers for that delayed cut. Mm-hmm. This past couple of years, we've had close to 1,000, and in 2021, we actually had more than 1,000 acres that were set aside for bobolinks. And on average, we're getting off somewhere 500 plus fledglings a year, if not more, on these higher acreages. So it really has been successful, and has been really successful in getting the communities involved and raising money and keeping bobolinks around. They're a great bird to see in the summer.
Right, and what's wonderful, it's not just the bobolinks that can take advantage of this lake cutting. The meadowlarks. What are some of the other birds that benefit from this project?
Yeah, so you mentioned meadowlarks, and meadowlarks have come up, eastern meadowlarks have come up on the show a couple of times recently, because they just got listed as threatened in the state of Vermont. And so these same management practices, which help out bobolinks by delaying these cuts or doing different management things, directly impact things like the eastern meadowlark that can benefit from this as well. The eastern meadowlark populations have really declined. As I said, it's now on the threatened species list. So we're looking to incorporate more properties with meadowlarks on them and bobolinks in the project.
Fantastic. And also there are other species that also benefit, some sparrows that look a lot like meadowlarks, actually.
Yeah, so, Dr. Strong mentioned a couple there, the Upland Sandpiper, which we don't have as much. That's a state endangered species. But a pretty common sparrow that's seen on these grasslands that benefits is the Savannah Sparrow. And this looks a lot like a song sparrow, but you'll see that yellow lures there right in front of the eye, between the eye and the bill. And so this is a bird that also does really well when these grasslands are protected. And then another species which uses a little bit different habitat and is much rarer in the state and is on the threatened species list is a bird called the Grasshopper Sparrow. And there's a couple locations in Vermont, but these birds benefit. They have a very insect-like song, which is how they get their name. These are two sparrows that, are going to the bobolink leads the way, and other birds benefit from those actions.
It's fantastic. And it was interesting that there was also it was a raptor, a northern harrier. Also, that might surprise some people that also benefits from this project.
Right. So the northern harrier, or it used to be called the Marsh Hawk, and Al had a picture of one with that white tail patch. These are sometimes called the gray ghost because the males, like this one here, have this really gray sheen, and they feed and nest in grassland areas. So they're definitely a species that directly benefits from having that food source and the nesting habitat available to them. So again, it's a whole suite of species that depend on these grasslands. And much of those grasslands are dependent on the farmers because they're the ones that manage it and use it for agriculture, dairy, and horses and other things. So bringing the two together to make a successful project is really exciting.
Yeah, it's wonderful how incredibly successful this is. So how can people help continue growing this project?
So the best way, and both farmers can enroll at this site, at the Bobolink Project site, and so you can go there and farmers can enroll and see how enrollment works. But more importantly, or as importantly, is folks can go to the site and they can also donate. And that money then goes into a big pot of money that can go to the farmers, that helps them offset the costs of, conserving these grassland bird species by, managing their hay fields slightly different.
Yeah, just a little bit of a delay. Thank you so much, Mark, and for that update. It's so exciting, and it's nice to know that there's a way for all of us to contribute.
Yes.
In the meantime, in the time that we have remaining, I like to dip into our viewer mail. We haven't done that in a little while. We have a letter and an image here from Dave Trono of Bethlehem, New Hampshire, and Dave says, "Hi, Mark. We have been seeing a group of 3 of these birds just about every day at the house, feeding on berries from sumac trees. I believe they're a ruffed grouse. It seems like most birds don't really like sumac, but with a foot of snow still on the ground here, at least there is an available food source." The photo was taken through the kitchen window. That's kind of remarkable. It's a great photo. And I like how there is a little bit of snow on that sumac. Your response to that?
It is a real great photo. We sometimes think ruffed grouse, partridge, as they're sometimes known, as just this kind of brown bird. But boy, around the neck there, you can see the colors, and you can see that crest. And that sumac this time of year, it is still on a lot of the bushes, and so it becomes an important food source for species that are here, like the ruffed grouse, and might not be able to get food with the snow, and also species that are returning, our robins and things like that, that will feed on that sumac. So,
well, we want to thank him for sending this in, and if you have bird-related questions or a picture, you can pass it along to Mark at the mailing address on your screen, or you can send him an email. His address is mlabar@audubon.org, so you can send your questions on to him. A very quick announcement that you have for us today.
Yeah, so just a real quick one, a pitch for the Green Mountain Audubon Center. Our Sugar on Snow parties, our annual event, are happening on the 26th and the 27th of March.
Okay,
and
people can come.
From 11 to 4.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay, thanks.
See you next time. And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.